Unfit for office. That's how one Republican described former President Donald Trump.
If you're willing to put yourself above the Constitution, an oath you swear when you take office. As a member of Congress, you swear an oath to the Constitution. And if you're willing to suborn it to yourself, I think that makes you unfit for office.
But that does not mean he's endorsing President Biden. It was enough for him, however, to be attacked by pro-Trump House Republicans.
Paul Ryan, you're a piece of garbage. You're a piece of garbage, and we should kick you out of the party. Don't go spouting your mouth off and saying you're a conservative. You're spitting in the face of the leader of our party, Donald Trump. I mean, grow up a little bit.
Ouch. All right, joining me now is CNN senior political commentator David Axelrod, is a former senior advisor to President Obama, and perhaps most importantly, fellow Chicago Bears and Cubs fan.
And fully grown.
And fully grown. There you go. Well, David, you've been talking to Republicans like Chris Christie about, how they are dealing with this race. Just to our viewers listen to about what Chris Christie's been saying.
There are no character guardrails anymore. There are no red lines that, okay, you cross over this, I cannot be with you. And to me, that red line for character was election night 2020. When you start to screw with the democratic transfer of power from the voters, that's it. I'm done.
Yet, still not endorsing Biden. So how does Biden get these Republicans on board?
Yeah, we should point out, and Chris Christie is a friend of mine. I can say that because he's retired now, so I don't want to. But he is retired because the voters, Republican voters, rejected the argument. So, Trump has a pretty strong hold on that party. There are some Republicans holding out. But yes, Biden has to get them to cross the bridge here. They're willing to leave Trump and say they're not going to vote for Trump. Biden has to get them. Part of that is a mechanical process, Manu, and that's he has to ask. Mm-hmm. He has to call. I don't believe he's had a conversation with Chris Christie.
Right, call him up, right?
And I've heard from many other Republicans who are very disaffected with Trump, who've never spoken with Biden.
How do you think, Biden so well? Why has he not just picked up the phone?
I don't know. I really don't know. Some people said, well, there was a concern that if he calls, the call would get out, and if they didn't endorse, that would be a reject. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, these are free agents out there, and he should try and grab them, because I think the more Republicans who step forward and say, you know what, I'm voting for Biden, the more it creates a permission structure for Republican voters who are worried about Trump's moral, ethical, and legal failing. So,
and there is an opportunity for them. I mean, just look at how the Nikki Haley voters voted after she dropped out of the primary in a number of states, including some battleground states, and 18% in Arizona and Pennsylvania, 16%. So, and these were closed primaries since March 6th. So, I mean, are those actually gettable voters? And what specifically do they need to do? What case do they make to those voters specifically?
Well, look, I think the case that Christie's making about the Constitution and rules and laws, norms and institutions will appeal to some. There are others who have a wholly different view of national security, and certainly Nikki Haley does from Trump. And Biden is the one who's standing up to Putin and holding firm there, and that should be, to the old Reagan Republicans, that should be encouragement as well. But so I think there are arguments to be made, but you have to make them.
Mm-hmm. I mean, but, I've heard Democrats say that Trump is an existential threat to American democracy. Yeah. Are you satisfied with that message, or should they be doing more of that?
Listen, I think that I share the concern about a guy who has absolutely no regard for rules or laws or norms or institutions, and we've seen what the impact of that is. And I think we owe Trump the respect of believing what he's saying when he says he's going to be about the business of corralling the Justice Department and going after his enemies and stuff. I think that's what he wants to do, and that's what he'll try to do.
But Biden has he been doing enough to make that case?
Well, here's my concern. There are a lot of people who recognize all of these things and Trump's all of his failings. But I keep saying, if you are talking about democracy over the dinner table, it's probably because you don't have to worry about the food, the cost of the food on your table. I think Biden has to create tangible contrasts with Trump on stuff that touches people's lives. You know, democracy, as important as it is, can be an abstract notion if you have day-to-day concerns. And I think Biden has a case to make on those day-to-day concerns, on what he would do and what Trump would do.
Interesting.
You know?
And so let's talk a little bit about the debate, which is coming up here on CNN in just a matter of a couple weeks, June 27th. Biden, his preparation for this, and how much do you think you should hammer home the fact that he's running against a convicted felon? Or is that becoming a little bit more complicated given though the fact that his son was just...
I go back to my last answer. I think that, you know, that will undoubtedly come up. There'll be points of reference there. But there are people out there who are saying, I know all that, but my groceries are too costly. My my rent is getting too high. I can't get insurance, and so on. Biden needs to really lay out the fact that he is fighting for them. Trump is fighting for himself, and they're beginning to strike that theme. But I think that's something that's as important to drive as these democracy messages in this debate.
And how should you deal with, and inevitably Hunter Biden's going to come up. How should you deal with that?
Well, look, I think that there's solicitude for him as a father. I don't think the Hunter Biden thing is currently hurting him with voters. I think what may be interesting in the debate is I could absolutely see Trump, who doesn't want to ruffle the feathers of the gun lobby, saying to Biden, I can't believe you're going to let your kid go to prison on that.
That would be an interesting turn, but we'll see if we did it. Remember last time they had that debate in 2020, it was a better moment for Joe Biden about the Hunter Biden situation.
Yeah, but if he comes in on a left-handed kind of way, that would be a challenge for Biden. If I were prepping him, I'd prepare him for that.
Yeah. All right. Well, David Axelrod, thanks for this discussion.